It has, of course, broken a Canadian publishing record because it is, of course, The Testaments, Margaret Atwood's sequel to The Handmaid's Tale.
Let's go! Hurry up! Faster!
That book was turned into a hit dystopian TV series about a place called Gilead, which is the new name of a part of the United States after a fascist religious takeover.
If I'm going to change things, I'm going to need allies.
That series sparked so many questions from viewers and readers. The political era seemed so ripe. Atwood had to write the sequel, and in it, there's hope that the cruel, right-suppressing reign ends.
This is more than a book release. This is a cultural moment.
The world wanted this book, the frenzy, Harry Potter-esque.
I'm very excited about it.
I'm excited to see where she takes it.
The two winners of the 2019 Booker Prize for Fiction.
Atwood co-winning the British Literary Prize, The Man Booker. But the universe isn't always kind, and as if to counter the highs, it delivered a terrible low. Her partner and great love, the accomplished writer Graham Gibson, died in September in London, England, while he was with Atwood to celebrate her book launch.
I am so honored to have you here.
Well, I'm happy to be here.
She remains busy, maybe necessarily so, but she found time to talk at the Thomas Fisher Rare Book Library in Toronto.
I think, like a lot of Canadians, I've thought about you a lot in the last couple months, and I'm just wondering how you are.
Pretty steady. Better for me to be out in public and keep on the road. But of course, it was a shock, but we knew it was coming. So family was prepared. I think Graham himself pretty much knew that something like that was going to happen pretty soon. But we had a very nice 10 days before that happened.
To be sitting in here is interesting. It's beautiful. I have to confess, as someone who was born in the city, raised in the city, I've never been in here before. And I'm wondering if you can tell me a little bit about the treasures that are in here that matter to you.
Among the things that are in here are my papers, which I donate to them on a regular basis. So of recent months, people have been going through the boxes of newspaper and magazine clippings that I made at the time I was writing The Handmaid's Tale. So they're going back and looking at what might have influenced it, what might have prompted it, what might I have been putting into that book from real life.
When we talk about things that are in boxes in libraries, I have to confess being a bit enchanted with the idea of this manuscript that's in a Norwegian library.
The future library of Norway. A forest got planted that will grow for 100 years. In each year of those 100 years, a different author from around the world will put a secret manuscript, only 2 copies, into the future library of Norway.
Be careful, it's the first.
And in the 100th year, the boxes will all be opened, and enough paper will be made from the trees that will have grown to print the anthology of the future library of Norway. And people will still be able to read, and people will still be interested in reading. Those are a lot of hopeful things.
So I won't be here.
You think? Maybe, maybe they will have some new technology by then.
But could you throw a girl a bone in terms of what it's about?
Nope.
Nothing?
Nope. You have to swear to secrecy. All I can tell you is it's made of words.
On the Testaments, when you read it, when I read it, there's a moment that I feel like I'm reading the newspaper a little bit. It's so familiar, you know. Is it making too much of a presumption to say that the kickstart there was the inauguration of Donald Trump?
No, it started before then. Mm-hmm. But you could see it coming. And you could see the things that the Republicans had been saying in the 2 elections before that time, the ones in which Obama won.
And what are those things?
Women should be subservient. If a woman is carrying a dead baby, she should just carry it until it comes out because they're like cows. It's not real rape if the woman has a baby, because if it's real rape, her body shuts down. Tell that to Bangladesh. There's just an appalling amount of ignorance.
What is it about the book that made doing that important in the face of these sorts of conversations?
For a long time, we seemed to be moving away from Gilead, especially in the 90s, right after the Cold War ended, and we were told it's the end of history and now we'll all go shopping. And we did go shopping until 9/11. Yes, then it turned out there were other things to think about in addition to shopping. And then the financial meltdown, and when there's uncertainty and a certain amount of chaos, people get anxious and frightened and are willing to trade certain civil liberties for somebody who will make the trains run on time. So that's what interested me, and it also interested me to go back into Gilead 16 years later and see how it might have begun to crumble, it being my belief that these things do ultimately crumble in some way.
There's a lot that makes me smile when I read the Testament. So one of the things is that Canada is sort of seen as a sanctuary, and that makes me smile because I think a lot of Canadians presume that's what their country is. And
then it isn't.
Right.
But you're not going from imperfect land to perfect land. You're going from worst to less worst.
Where do you see the fragilities in this country? I mean, you were on the road for a lot of the election.
Yeah.
But did you hear language, did you hear conversations or speeches that set off alarm bells for you?
Oh, I think things got somewhat less civil than they have been in past years. But that's been happening across the board, and certainly in the United States and England. Politicians have been talking in ways that once upon a time they never would have spoken in those ways. It would have been considered unstatesmanlike. But there's a big signaler of that kind of vulgar language sitting in the White House. So it does set a tone.
And does that tone flow north?
You know what they say. Washington hasn't cold, Ottawa sneezes. Of course it flows north. It is a one-way mirror that we're pretty much glued to.
Some of the conversations that during the election I found kind of interesting because I think a lot of people thought a woman's right to choose, same-sex marriage, that these were settled issues in Canada.
They're not settled issues. They're settled for now. They can always be reversed.
Do you smell a backslide?
In this country, not so much. You'll notice who did not win the election. So not so much, but enough that you should feel somewhat apprehensive.
I noticed, I think we all saw at the Man Bookers that you were wearing the Extinction Rebellion button.
Yes, I absolutely was.
And what draws you to this group in particular?
Okay, this group, it was started by young people. There's a lot of them. They have the power to move the political needle because any politician who can count must realize that soon this demographic will be voting. And if they pay no attention whatsoever to this planetary-wide event that is going to kill a lot of people and already has, and may ultimately finish off the human race, if they're not going to pay any attention to that, this large block of new voters will not be voting for them.
Who inspires you at the moment? I mean, this group is inspiring.
Yes, it's inspiring.
But who else inspires you?
Oh, how many do I have to pick? Then you'll say,
That's
who
nice
else?
that
And
you
what
have
about
so
them?
many.
No, I don't actually.
Greta?
Well,
Greta Thunberg?
yeah. In fact, I just got her little bookie, which I'm about to read. Yeah, she's very inspiring, and I love her answer to people who are pestering her about having Asperger's. She said, "It's a superpower." Good for her.
I hadn't planned to ask you this, but I'm just, you're here and I can't help it. This month for you, November in particular, I guess you have what...
You mean I'm going to turn 80?
Well, there's that. And my friends call it a roundy birthday.
A roundy, it's got a zero at the end.
Correct.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if you at this age could pull a much younger you aside and say, look, I have a few minutes to let you know what's coming, what to watch for, what to enjoy, what I wish I'd been told. What would you tell her?
What a weird question.
I know, I'm sorry.
You don't get that chance. And, You know, part of living life is not knowing. If you knew everything, it would be quite a different proposition. In fact, it would be number one, more boring, and number two, more depressing. It's that anticipation of not knowing what's in the big box with the ribbon on top. You know, if you already knew it, it wouldn't be fun.
Your time, as always, is hugely appreciated.
And thank you very much.